Hi, and welcome back to Plastic Models by a Regular Dude and the viewer's choice build number 2, the Edward 1/48 scale MiG 21 PFM. That's a mouthful. Okay, here's how it sits. I put the upper wings on and had to do a little bit of filling in the gap here, and for that I used, with some success finally, the Vallejo plastic putty. It actually worked pretty well. Just used a toothpick or cocktail stick depending on where you're from, and just put it all along the edge there, then used my finger. I wet my finger and wiped off as much as I could, then using the Tamiya cotton buds, because these aren't by any means Q-tips like here in the US. I used that to wet that, and then ran it along and got all the excess out and just left that little bead, and it all cleaned up fairly well. All I'll need to do now is there's a few places like in the in some of the panel lines and the rivets there along the edge, rivet detail, that I'll have to clean that out, but as you can see that comes right out, so it's not going to be hard to do. So I'll do that once I get more to the cleanup stages of the kit, but for now I need to glue these parts here, and then all the flaps and these parts here. Now this part here that goes on the edge of the wing, we can either use the kit part C37, which is made out of styrene, or the photo etch part, which is PE26. And in this particular case, because it's such a thin part, the kit part is perfectly fine, and it'll be a lot easier to glue into place, and there's less chance of me knocking it off when I'm doing work on this thing. So I'm going to cut out these parts here, start gluing them onto the wings, see what's going on. Alright, so I got the control surfaces installed, and then I almost forgot to install the rudder, so I went ahead and did that. And on these parts here, I went ahead and used the photo etch parts, and the reason I did is because where this part goes, there's a very thin groove for this to actually fit in, so there's no monkeying around with it. It fits in there. I was able to actually set it in there and then apply the CA glue. So that's a photo etch part that actually works really well. So the next part, I need to flip it over, start working on some stuff here. And the first part, I'm going to do this part here, which is this sub-assembly, which is for versions B and E only, which falls into my my category. So I've got it all assembled, and it fits right here. But I'm not going to put that on just yet because I have to put some other parts on first. But this is assembled, and it's been sanded, and panel lines rescribed. And what I do is, when I rescribe some panel lines, just to smooth it out, I put a very little bit of cement on there to make sure it looks smooth. Nothing weird going on. So there's that. And then, whoops, the other part is this part that goes along L10, which goes along the lower part of the fuselage and the rear. And I scraped and sanded to make sure it fits really nicely like that. So go ahead and put some cement on here where that flat part is there. Then I'm going to add a little bit between like that, push it in place. Now, one thing I want to make note of, and then I discovered this during doing some research on this aircraft, is like this, for instance, I was really careful to make sure that, you know, it fit really super snug and all that kind of stuff. However, if you look at photographs of this aircraft, this seam line along this hump right here is hideous. I mean, it looks horrible. Now, whether or not you could get away with that in a model contest, I don't know, but it just really is a poor fit on the real thing. So that's something to keep in mind whenever you're assembling this kit. Is some of this stuff, check your references, some of this stuff to fit on it is just hideous at best. So, you know, it's actually supposed to be that way, I guess. So that's just some food for thought whenever you're building one of these, if you build one. Now, I myself, I like to keep it as tight a tolerances as I can and make it look as decent as I can. But, you know, again, just check your references. Sometimes sloppy fit is just actually part of the real deal. Now, I will note that in the photographs I looked at, I'm going to put this on here and hold it in place while it sets up. It seems in the photographs that some aircraft are either they just weren't used as much, or better maintained, or closer tolerances for manufacturing. I don't know. But for example, on the Czechoslovakian aircraft, which is what I'm working on, just from the few, you know, reference photos I saw, and I'm sure there's like all kinds of differences, but it seems like the fit and finish on the Czech planes is a lot nicer than, say, on some of the Soviet aircraft. The Soviet aircraft seem to be really dirty, kind of worn looking, as opposed to the Czech aircraft. So I don't know if that's a common thing or just in the photos that I happen to look at. So that's something to think about when you're putting this thing together. All right, so I got this pod cemented in place, and these little teeny tiny parts are ready to go on. So we've got two C23, two D32s, and there's a D41, but I'll cut that off in a minute. So the D23 goes right there. So whoops. So we'll do that one first. It's just basically got a little bit of an outline there, so you know where to put it. Again, I know I've said it a bunch of times already, but I'm going to keep saying it. The parts on this thing fit really well. There's a few things that, you know, need a little bit of putting in place, but for the most part everything is fitting really well. And I see this right here, I'm gonna have to tack that down. That part right there that I had to put on first, you have open M3 or closed M2. I'm doing closed, so that's the part I used. Okay, I'll tack that down in a minute. So then the next part, D32, fits here. And that looks pretty good. So what I'll do there, I've already scraped and cleaned that part on the underneath. So what I'll do is I'll put a little bit of cement in those two locating holes for the locating pins. Put those in place. And then a little bit more underneath like that. Give it a good squish down to make sure it's seated properly. Okay, so there's that. So let's see, so I have the same two parts go on the other side, so I'll do that in a minute, but I need D41, which is this little piece here. And that goes right there. And there it is in place. All right, so that's that. So let me spin it around, put these other two small parts on, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, now that page 7 is done, I'm ready to move on to page 8. But real quick, like these two pieces here need to be attached. Those are D43. There's one on each wingtip, and that is the hole, if you will remember, or where it goes, was the one that I had to drill two small holes with the pin vise and then square it up for those to fit, and it worked just nicely. So on page 8, let's take a look at what we've got on page 8. So the first thing is this section up here. These steps here are only used if you have the air brakes open and this panel open. If those are open, you need to do these parts. If you opted not to have the air brakes open or this panel here, then you just skip that part. So the next part is to start working on the landing gear and the landing gear doors. So what I'm going to do is I need to assemble the wheels first and then attach them to the landing gear struts. The doors themselves, the landing gear doors, as you can see here, I've got them on my painting tapes, what I like to call it. I'm painting one side of something, and I just stick it on here. So I need to prime this, and then this will have to be painted the bare metal color that I'm be using for the overall aircraft. So I can't glue those in place yet. So that's the main gear doors and then the front gear doors. So for right now, I'm just going to start assembling the landing gear themselves. So I am going to start cutting these parts off and getting it all ready. And what I'll do is I'll paint the wheels and the struts themselves separately before I actually cement them together. So let me start cutting those parts off. Alright, well, first thing I did was I cut the gear bay doors off. Now they're painted on the other side, the interior color they're supposed to be. So I stuck them on here so I can prime the outside, because this is going to have a metal finish on it. So I'm going to use my gloss primer to prime this stuff. Then I also have to prime and paint the hubs. The tire portion is done, sanded, ready to go. So all I have to do on those is prime and paint those. And then the struts themselves, I already assembled one, which would be, I think it's the right side. So it's 3 pieces for the strut, not counting the door. So you have these 2 pieces here, which is D45 and 44, have to be glued onto the strut. So doing a mirror image here, let me make sure I do it the right direction. Whoops. So the angle goes out like that. So this part goes on here like this. Okay. And then this part here goes on here like this. So it's kind of tricky. So I think what I'll do, it can be tedious. I don't want to, well, let's see if I can do it on here. This one goes here. Now the other one fit a lot more snugly. Whoa, I think I got it backwards. Let's see, that's correct, but the lower part is not, so I need to flip that around. Lovely Rita. There we go. So I'll push those 2 pieces down like that till they meet like they're supposed to. So one thing that's nice about this to me is cement is it gives you a little bit of time to work. There we go. There it is. So I'll put a little bit of cement to make sure it's locked into place. And like that. And voila. That is done. So I'm going to put this on here and let it dry up. So what I can do here, as soon as that dries up, then I can put those on some of my painting sticks and get those ready to prime. So while that one is drying, I'm going to go ahead and cut off the parts for the front landing gear. All right, I got the parts cleaned up. except for those two. But first I need to put part number D64. I made sure where the parts come together are nice and flat. So they will fit together thusly. Like that. Okay. So I got that in position. The trick is to glue as much as I can together before painting, but still make it to where I'm not having to paint around a bunch of stuff. So that's what I'm doing here. So let's see. So I think I'm at the point where I can test fit this here. Yeah, it goes right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get these parts ready for primer, because I've glued pretty much all I can. I think I'll put one side of this landing gear here in place. The other one I won't, because I don't want to have to worry about parts popping off. So I think what I'll do is I'll put this side here on. So I'm going to glue that onto here, and then I'm going to get everything prepped and ready for primer. Okay, before I start priming, all this stuff's prepped for priming. So before I do that though, I looked ahead a little bit, and there are two more parts that go on the fuselage here. Well, three parts that go on the fuselage here that I need to get prepped for primer as well. So I'm going to go ahead and assemble this and that and get those put together. Okay, I have the parts primed. So what I need to do next, the gear strut and wheel parts, I'm going to leave aside. These parts here that are to be painted silver or aluminum, the metal finish, I'm going to leave those aside for now. And then the parts I need to paint right now is I need to hand paint this part right here gray. This part here needs to be sprayed with the interior color, and then a couple of details painted flat black. So using my Vallejo Model Air to brush paint with, that is what I'm going to do. So I'll do that real quick, and then I'll be able to glue these parts onto the fuselage. Now this part right here doesn't have to be a real good paint job, because you can barely see a little bit of edge of this, and truth be told, you won't even be able to see it once this panel is glued in place onto the fuselage. So we'll see. So I'm not gonna get all crazy about painting it. Excuse the rough sound of voice. I've got a bit of a head cold going on, so I may sound like kind of Darth Vader-ish a little bit. All right, so I'm gonna get this paint right here, get it all shaped up, and spray this part here so I can put that in place. And that will pretty much take care of the front of the aircraft once I put those pieces in. So let me paint this one up real quick, and then we'll come back to install it all. Alright, here it is with the front end finished, and that concludes this part up here of page 9. So the next time when I come back, I will be working on starting on the seat, the ejection seat, and then moving on from there. So that is it for this video on the viewer's choice build number 2, the Edward 1/48 scale MiG 21 PFM. So if you have any questions, comments, blah blah blah, put them down below. I'll get back to you, and until next time, I will see you all later.